"Don't lock that door!" Harper Bennett's voice cracked as the metallic click echoed through the empty classroom. 5 varsity football players surrounded her desk, their letterman jackets forming a wall of crimson and gold. Derek Thompson, the team captain, stepped forward with a smile that belonged on a predator. "You really thought you could fail us?" His 6'2" frame towered over her petite 5'3" figure. "Don't you know who my father is?" Harper's fingers trembled as they searched for something inside her blazer pocket. The afternoon sun streaming through the windows cast long shadows across the linoleum floor, making the empty hallways beyond seem even more desolate. "I'm only going to say this once." Her voice carried an unusual calm that contradicted her shaking hands. "Open that door and let me leave." Derek laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the walls covered with Shakespeare quotes and grammar rules. His teammates joined in, their amusement filling the space where 28 students usually sat learning about metaphors and thesis statements. None of them noticed Harper's thumb finding the small device in her pocket. None of them could imagine that in exactly 8 minutes, their privileged world would come crashing down. The story had begun 2 weeks earlier on a crisp October morning. Harper Bennett had walked into Lincoln High School with the optimism of every new teacher. Her lesson plans meticulously prepared, her belief in education still untarnished by reality. The private school's marble entrance gleamed under the Colorado sun, its $40,000 annual tuition evident in every manicured lawn and luxury vehicle in the student parking lot. She'd noticed Derek Thompson immediately during her third-period advanced literature class, while other students at least pretended to pay attention. Derek sprawled across his desk like he owned it, which, in a way, he did. His father served as board president. His mother headed the PTA, and their donations kept the new athletic complex running. When Harper returned his first essay, marked with a glaring F for plagiarism, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "This must be a mistake," Derek had said, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. The essay, clearly purchased from an online service, hadn't even bothered to change the font from the website's default. "My essays never get less than a B+. Harper had met his gaze steadily, something her predecessors apparently hadn't dared to do. "Then perhaps you should start writing them yourself, Mr. Thompson. Academic integrity isn't negotiable in my classroom." The whispers started that afternoon. By the time Harper reached the faculty lounge, 3 teachers suddenly found reasons to leave. Only Mrs. Chen, the calculus teacher nearing retirement, had the courage to approach her. "Be careful with that one," she'd whispered, glancing around nervously. The last teacher who failed Derek Thompson lasted exactly 6 weeks. Harper had dismissed it as typical school politics, the kind of drama that plagued institutions where money spoke louder than merit. She'd dealt with difficult students before during her teacher training. Teenagers who tested boundaries and pushed limits. What she hadn't anticipated was the systematic campaign that would follow. The anonymous emails began 3 days after she'd returned Derek's plagiarized essay. They started almost politely, suggesting she reconsider her grading policies, reminding her that student athletes faced unique pressures. When Harper didn't respond, the tone shifted. Details about her commute appeared in the messages. Descriptions of what she'd worn that day. Mentions of the small coffee shop where she stopped each morning for her vanilla latte. On the Thursday of her first week, Harper arrived to find her car tires slashed in the faculty parking lot. Security cameras, conveniently, had malfunctioned during that exact hour. Principal Walker, a man who wore his 60 years like armor against confrontation, suggested she might have driven over construction debris. His office, adorned with photos of successful alumni including several Thompsons, felt more like a courtroom where she stood accused of disrupting the natural order. "Miss Bennett," Principal Walker had said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "Lincoln High values academic excellence, but we also understand the importance of flexibility. Our student-athletes represent the school's tradition. Perhaps you could reassess Derek's assignment with a more holistic approach." Harper had left that meeting with her principles intact, but her illusions shattered. The institution she'd hoped to serve prioritized donations over education, tradition over truth. That evening, she'd found a note tucked under her windshield wiper. The message printed in bold letters, "Smart teachers know when to look the other way." The harassment escalated with calculated precision. Derek's friends joined the campaign, their behavior in class shifting from disrespectful to deliberately disruptive. They talked over her lectures, laughed at inappropriate moments, and submitted assignments that bordered on insulting. When Harper maintained her standards, failing papers that deserved to fail. The atmosphere grew increasingly hostile. On Monday of the second week, Harper discovered a small camera hidden behind books on her classroom shelf. The device, no bigger than a button, had been recording her every move. Her hands shook as she removed it, wondering how long it had been there, what footage existed, what plans were being made with that invasion of her privacy. She'd reported it to Principal Walker, who promised an investigation that never materialized. The text messages started that night. Photos of her apartment building, images of her walking from her car, pictures taken through her classroom windows when she stayed late grading papers. Each message came from different numbers, untraceable and relentless. "Teaching is dangerous work," one read. "Accidents happen to teachers who don't listen," said another. Harper had considered quitting, late at night, staring at her ceiling and jumping at every sound outside her apartment. She'd wondered if any job was worth this torment. But something deeper than fear kept her returning each morning. Maybe it was stubborn pride. Maybe it was the handful of students who genuinely wanted to learn. Or maybe it was the principle that bullies shouldn't win simply because they could afford to. She'd started documenting everything. Every email printed and filed. Every incident logged with times and dates. Every witness noted even if they'd never speak up. Harper's organizational skills, honed through years of academic training, transformed her fear into methodical preparation. She might be David facing Goliath, but she'd make sure her stones were precisely aimed. The Thursday that would change everything started like any other. Harper arrived early, checked her classroom for new surveillance devices, and prepared for another day of educational warfare. Derek and his crew had been surprisingly subdued during morning classes, their usual disruptions replaced by whispered conversations and meaningful glances. She should have recognized the calm before the storm. By 3:45 p.m., the school had emptied with typical Thursday efficiency. Harper remained in her classroom, grading papers and trying to provide meaningful feedback to students who still cared about learning. The football team had practice, she knew, which usually meant 90 minutes of peace before the athletes returned to collect forgotten items or harass any teacher unfortunate enough to still be working. The knock on her door at 4:15 p.m. seemed innocent enough. Derek Thompson stood in the doorway, his practice uniform replaced by jeans and his letterman jacket. Behind him, 4 teammates filled the hallway like a wall of muscle and privilege. "Miss Bennett," Derek's voice carried false politeness, "we need to discuss our grades." Harper's instincts screamed warnings, but she maintained her professional composure. "Office hours are Monday and Wednesday, Mr. Thompson. Please schedule an appointment through the proper channels. That's when Blake Morrison, the quarterback whose father owned 3 car dealerships, stepped forward and closed the door. The click of the lock engaging sounded like a judge's gavel marking the end of pretense. Harper stood slowly, her hand instinctively moving toward her blazer pocket, where she kept her phone and something else. Something her husband had insisted she carry despite her protests about overreaction. Now. Derek moved closer, his cologne mixing with the scent of arrogance and steroid-fueled aggression. No need to make this difficult. We just want to have a little chat about reasonable expectations. You see, Miss Bennett, you seem to be under the impression that your standards matter more than our futures. The other boys spread out, a practiced formation that suggested this wasn't their first intimidation attempt. Ryan Cooper blocked the windows while Jake Martinez positioned himself by the supply closet. Tommy Chen, despite his nervous glances, stood guard at the door. They'd choreographed this scene, Harper realized, turned classroom terrorism into a team sport. Harper's fingers found the small device in her pocket, a gift from someone who understood danger better than any civilian should. "Gentlemen," she kept her voice steady despite her racing pulse, "this conversation is over. Open the door immediately or face consequences far beyond failing grades." The laughter that erupted felt rehearsed, as if they'd practiced their reactions to her protests. Derek pulled out his phone, aiming the camera at her face. "Recording this for posterity," he announced. "Everyone should see how unreasonable teachers can be. You know what happened to Mr. Campbell? He tried to fail me sophomore year. Poor guy had a nervous breakdown, started seeing threats everywhere, had to take early retirement for his mental health." Harper's mind raced through her options. The panic button in her pocket could summon help, but using it meant escalating beyond the school's ability to contain the situation. These boys had crossed lines before without consequence, their actions protected by wealth and connection. But they'd made one crucial mistake today. They'd assumed Harper Bennett was just another teacher they could break. What they didn't know was that Harper's maiden name wasn't Bennett. They didn't know she'd spent 3 years as Sarah Harrison, FBI analyst specializing in organized crime before love and marriage led her to teaching. They didn't know her husband had insisted on certain precautions after a previous stalking incident during her bureau days. Most importantly, they didn't know that the small device in her pocket wasn't just a panic button, but a sophisticated distress beacon linked directly to the one person in Denver who'd move heaven and earth to protect her. Derek stepped closer, close enough that Harper could see the telltale signs of steroid abuse in his dilated pupils and facial bloating, the aggressive behavior, the mood swings, the group mentality. It all pointed to something darker than typical teenage rebellion. Her analyst training kicked in, patterns emerging from seemingly random data points, the athlete's synchronized harassment, the administration's deliberate blindness, the systematic targeting of specific teachers. This wasn't just bullying. This was organized crime, wearing a letterman jacket. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and Derek's eyes narrowed. "Give me the phone," he demanded, holding out his hand like a monarch expecting tribute. "No calling for help, no texting mommy and daddy. This stays between us until you agree to be reasonable about our grades." Harper pulled out the phone slowly, letting them see her compliance while her thumb found the hidden button on the panic device. The military-grade technology, designed for diplomatic protection details, needed only 3 seconds of sustained pressure to activate. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. The silent alarm engaged, its signal bouncing through encrypted channels to a response team that didn't care about school politics or donation dollars. "You want my phone?" Harper held the device up, its screen showing nothing more threatening than her lesson plan app. "Take it, but know that every second of this interaction is being uploaded to a cloud server my husband maintains. He's particular about my safety. Some might call him overprotective." Blake Morrison laughed nervously. "What's he gonna do, sue us? My dad's lawyer eats civil suits for breakfast." Harper allowed herself a small smile, the kind that made Derek's confidence waver for the first time. "Sue you, Gnome Blake. He's not the suing type. He's more direct in his problem-solving approach." Through the closed door, the faint sound of sirens began to penetrate the afternoon quiet. Derek's crew exchanged glances, their practiced formation beginning to fray at the edges. They'd expected tears, pleading, capitulation. They hadn't prepared for calm defiance backed by unknown resources. The sirens grew louder, multiple vehicles from the sound of it, and not the lazy wail of a single patrol car. Harper watched recognition dawn on Derek's face as the sounds shaped themselves into something more serious than a simple police response. The heavy vehicles, the synchronized approach, the speed of arrival. This wasn't standard procedure for a school disturbance. "What did you do?" Derek's voice cracked, his adult posturing crumbling to reveal the frightened boy beneath the bravado. The football players looked to their captain for guidance. But Derek had no plays for this scenario. Their privilege had always protected them before, creating a bubble where consequences happened to other people. Harper straightened her blazer, her trembling finally stilling as familiar sounds reached her ears. Steel-toed boots on linoleum, tactical formations being called, the metallic clicks of equipment being readied. "I gave you chances, Derek. Every failed assignment was an opportunity to do better. Every warning was a gift you threw away. You confused kindness with weakness, and that's a mistake people only make once with my family." The building shook as multiple entry points were breached simultaneously. Lincoln High's security system, designed to keep threats out, offered no resistance to the force approaching classroom 237. Through the door's small window, figures in black tactical gear moved with practiced efficiency, their movements coordinated by hundreds of hours of training. Tommy Chen stepped away from the door, his hands rising instinctively. "This is insane. We just wanted to talk about grades." "No," Harper corrected, her teacher's instinct for accuracy never fully suppressed. "You locked a woman in a room and attempted to intimidate her through physical presence and threats. You recorded it, thinking the video would protect you instead of providing evidence. You assumed wealth and connection would continue to shield you from consequences. You were wrong." The classroom door exploded inward, the lock offering no more resistance than tissue paper to the breaching team. Officers flooded the room, their weapons lowered but ready, their faces hidden behind tactical masks. The football players dropped to their knees with varying degrees of compliance, their teenage invincibility evaporating in the face of actual authority. But it was the last figure through the door that made Harper's heart simultaneously race and calm. Captain James Mitchell moved with the deadly grace of someone who'd faced real danger in places where backup meant air support and failure meant flag-draped coffins. At 6'4", he made Derek Thompson look like the child he really was. "Harper, what's your status?" Captain Mitchell's voice cut through the chaos, professional despite the personal stakes. His tactical mask couldn't hide the controlled fury in his movements as he assessed the scene. His wife, surrounded by teenage boys who'd thought intimidation was a game. stood with the composed dignity that had first attracted him years ago in a very different setting. "I'm unharmed," Harper replied, her voice steady now that the immediate danger had passed. "These students locked me in and attempted to coerce grade changes through intimidation. Everything's recorded on multiple devices." Derek Thompson, face pressed against the floor with his hands zip-tied behind his back, finally understood the magnitude of his miscalculation. "You're married to—" The words died as Captain Mitchell knelt beside him, close enough that Derek could see his own terrified reflection in the tactical goggles. "Yes," Mitchell's voice carried the weight of restrained violence. "She's mine, and you just made the biggest mistake of your entitled life." The search that followed standard detention protocol revealed more than anyone expected. When Officer Rodriguez emptied Derek's backpack, small blue pills scattered across the floor. Not just any pills, Debol, Anavar, and other anabolic steroids in quantities suggesting distribution rather than personal use. Blake Morrison's designer wallet contained not just Daddy's credit cards, but small baggies of white powder that field-tested positive for oxycodone. Wait! Derek's voice pitched higher with panic. "Those aren't mine. I'm just holding them for—" He caught himself, but the damage was done. In the world of criminal investigation, holding for someone was practically a confession. Mitchell's team worked with mechanical efficiency, but Harper caught the subtle signals between them. This wasn't surprise on their faces, this was confirmation. Her husband's laptop, set up on her desk as the command center, displayed sophisticated crime analysis software she recognized from her FBI days. The program mapped connections between incidents, tracking patterns across multiple schools. Red dots clustered around Lincoln High like a cancer diagnosis, with tendrils spreading to 11 other institutions. "Ma'am," Agent Rivera from the DEA entered the classroom, her appearance explaining the multi-agency response. "We need to discuss your reports from the past 6 months." The revelation hit the detained students like cold water. Harper hadn't just been documenting harassment. She'd been building a federal case. Every interaction, every threat, every suspicious behavior had been cataloged and analyzed with the precision of someone trained to unravel criminal enterprises. The scared new teacher they'd tried to break was actually an undercover asset who'd volunteered to investigate rumors of drug distribution in Denver's elite schools. Principal Walker arrived, his face cycling through emotions as uniformed officers explained the scope of the investigation. The 60-year-old administrator who'd suggested flexibility in grading suddenly needed his own chair when investigators mentioned conspiracy charges and RICO statutes. The network Harper had uncovered went beyond teenage dealers. It involved parents, suppliers, and a money laundering operation that used school fundraisers to clean drug profits. By 5:30 p.m., Lincoln High looked like a crime scene from a primetime drama. News vans clustered outside the gates while DEA agents executed search warrants on lockers, vehicles, and the athletic department's supplement storage. The evening news would lead with footage of Denver's elite in handcuffs, their children's college prospects evaporating faster than their parents' reputations. Mr. Thompson arrived in his $100,000 Mercedes just as his son was being loaded into a police transport. The board president's famous composure cracked as Agent Rivera read him his rights. The warrant detailing his role in supplying performance-enhancing drugs to student athletes who then sold to classmates. $3 million in drug money had flowed through accounts connected to school fundraisers, team equipment purchases, and building donations. The investigation's scope emerged over the following days like an avalanche gaining mass. 47 arrests across 12 schools. A pharmaceutical executive supplying stolen oxycodone. Coaches who turned blind eyes in exchange for winning seasons. Parents who rationalized drug dealing as entrepreneurship. The privilege that had protected these families for generations crumbled under federal jurisdiction that didn't recognize donation dollars. Harper testified before grand juries with the same calm precision she'd once used to analyze terrorist financing. Her dual identity, FBI analyst turned teacher turned informant, made headlines across the country. The scared woman surrounded by bullies transformed into a symbol of justice, refusing to bow to intimidation. Editorial writers praised her courage, while defense attorneys painted her as an agent provocateur who'd entrapped innocent children. 6 months later, Harper Bennett stood at the podium accepting Colorado's Teacher of the Year award. The ceremony, held in Lincoln High's auditorium, felt like poetic justice, where Derek Thompson had once ruled through fear. Reformed policies now protected both students and teachers. Where drugs had been dealt in designer backpacks, counselors now offered real support for academic pressure. Education? Harper told the audience of colleagues, students, and officials, isn't just about transmitting knowledge. It's about standing for truth, even when lies pay better. It's about protecting the vulnerable even when predators wear Letterman jackets. It's about believing that justice matters more than donations. The applause was thunderous, but Harper's trained eyes caught movement in the back row. A figure in a maintenance uniform who didn't quite move like janitorial staff. Her hand found James's, squeezing once in their private signal for potential threat. Later that evening, in their modest suburban home, Harper found the envelope tucked under her windshield wiper. No postmark, no return address, just her name in block letters. Inside, a single sheet of paper, "You destroyed our lives. Families don't forget." Below the text, a photo showed Harper and James at the farmer's market the previous weekend, crosshairs drawn over their faces in red ink. Harper's phone buzzed, the secure line only 5 people knew. The number showed as unknown, the voice synthesizer making gender impossible to determine. "Did you really think testifying would end this? You took down the small fish, teacher. The sharks are still swimming." She looked out her kitchen window at the black sedan parked 3 houses down, its occupants invisible behind tinted glass. The same car from that morning, from yesterday, from the day before. James was already moving, checking sight lines and drawing curtains with practiced efficiency. "James!" Harper's voice carried resignation mixed with determination. "I think we have a problem." He wrapped his arms around her, solid and protective. "We knew this might happen. The Thompsons had connections beyond Denver." "So what do we do?" James smiled, the expression his enemies had learned to fear. "What we always do. We handle it." Outside, the sedan's engine started, headlights cutting through the darkness as it pulled away slowly, deliberately, making sure they knew they were being watched. Harper thought about her students, about the kids who now felt safe reporting abuse, about the teachers who could maintain standards without fear. Some fights were worth having, even if they never really ended. She picked up her phone, scrolling to a contact labeled insurance. The FBI never really lets go of assets who prove valuable. "Director Stevens, this is Sarah Harrison. I think it's time we discussed that position you offered." The war for Lincoln High was over, but Harper knew justice was a lifetime campaign. Tomorrow she'd return teaching Shakespeare. Tonight, she and James would plan their next move. "Teachers shape the future," she whispered, watching the sedan's taillights disappear into Denver's darkness. Sometimes with red pens, sometimes with federal warrants.